Have you ever tried to change someone's mind? Maybe it was about politics, or religion, or science. Maybe it was just a silly disagreement you had with a friend. You explained your reasoning, you presented your evidence, and you genuinely thought you had a good point. And yet, they walked away believing exactly the same thing they believed before. But why? You see, I think the answer to that question changes how we should view disagreement altogether. So in my last video, I argued that we don't really choose what we believe, at least not directly. You can't simply choose to believe something if you're not convinced by it. Belief seems to be something that happens to us once we're convinced that it's true. And if that's the case, then it raises a much bigger question. If we can't directly choose what convinces us, how can we ever attempt to change someone else's mind? But this is where I think that we might be misunderstanding the purpose of disagreement. Because most disagreements I see seem to have the same goal: to convince, to persuade, to ultimately win. But if beliefs don't change through sheer force of will, then perhaps that was never the point. So then, if disagreement isn't for changing minds, what on earth is it for? I think the answer to that question starts with an important distinction. See, there's a difference between trying to get someone to agree with you and trying to give truth the best chance of being discovered. Those aren't always the same thing. Because if I'm only looking for reasons that I'm right and avoiding ideas that make me uncomfortable, or dismissing someone before I've even understood what they mean, am I actually searching for the truth? Or am I just defending the beliefs I already have? And when I look back at my own life, I've changed my mind about some pretty fundamental things. My faith, my diet, in many ways, the way I live my life entirely. But none of those changes happened because someone defeated me in an argument. They happened because over time, I came across different ideas, conversations, and experiences that I couldn't quite ignore. And slowly, the weight of them became too much. My beliefs changed because what convinced me changed. Which then made me realize, if that's how my mind changed, and I wasn't in complete control over it, why do I expect someone else's to work differently? And this got me thinking, maybe the best conversations we have aren't the ones where someone wins. Maybe they're the ones where both people leave with something new to think about. Not because either person has abandoned their beliefs, but because both have exposed their beliefs to scrutiny. And that feels like a very different goal. So how do we get to that point in a disagreement? Well, I think it starts with something surprisingly difficult. Trying to understand the other person's position well enough that they would say, yeah, that's what I believe. Not the simplified version, not the weakest one, but the real one. Because if I can't explain your position accurately, how could I possibly know whether I disagree with it? And if you can do the same for me, then we've stopped having two competing monologues and started having one shared search. Of course, saying that is much easier than actually doing it. Because if searching for the truth were that simple, we'd all be much better at doing it. So what gets in the way? Well, for starters, our brains evolved to work in a very different environment. Our ancestors lived in very small groups, and we're trying to figure things out like, should I trust this person? Where's a good place to get food? Was that wind I heard in the bushes? Or is that something that's likely to actually kill me? They didn't evolve to assess thousands of competing claims about nutrition, economics, history, vaccines, climate change, all before lunch. See, these days we're exposed to more information than any generation before us. Some of it's true, some of it isn't. But most of us don't have the time or the expertise to verify everything we see. And subsequently, almost every belief we have involves some degree of trust. And that matters because the information we trust starts to become part of the lens through which we judge everything else. But even if we did manage to judge every source of information perfectly, then there would still be another problem. None of us enter a disagreement from a completely neutral perspective. We all carry our own experiences, our own fears, our own values, our own biases. And those things shape not only what we believe, but what evidence we notice, what sources we trust, and which explanations feel convincing in the first place. Which means the real question we should ask ourselves isn't how do I become completely objective? Because that might just be impossible. But we can ask, how do I hold my own beliefs accountable? Not because I assume I'm irrational, but because I know I'm human. And some of humanity's greatest achievements seem to understand this. Science doesn't work because scientists are unbiased. It works because scientists are allowed, even encouraged, to challenge one another. Ideas are criticized. Experiments are repeated. Mistakes are corrected. Progress doesn't come from assuming that individuals are infallible. It comes from building systems that allow imperfect people to discover when they're wrong. And I can't help from wondering whether our conversations should work in much the same way. Imagine if every disagreement started with one assumption. Not, I'm going to change your mind, but between the two of us, there's a much better chance of discovering where we're wrong than either of us has alone. Suddenly the other person isn't just an obstacle, they're another perspective, another set of experiences, another opportunity to discover a blind spot you didn't know you had. I don't think we're ever going to eliminate disagreement, and I'm not sure that certainty should be the goal. In fact, I'm becoming increasingly suspicious of certainty. Maybe the goal is something much simpler, to become the kind of person who genuinely wants to know when they're wrong, who can change their mind without feeling defeated, who can separate criticism of an idea from criticism of themselves. Because what if disagreements aren't battles, but you and I standing on different sides of the same mountain, each able to see something the other can't? Alone, neither of us will get the full picture. But together, if we're willing to describe what we see, to challenge what we think we know, and to let the other person do the same, then perhaps we can get a little closer. Not because either of us is certain, but because we're both trying to give the truth the best chance of being discovered. Maybe that's how disagreement can really serve us. Thanks for watching.